Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. It is 10 a.m. once again, meaning that it is time to bring back the live session for the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. I hope all of you are doing good and you have been attending all the sessions of our ongoing Target Prelims 2023 initiative right here on our YouTube channel. Just reminding you, today's session of the ongoing Target Prelims 2023 series at 7:30 p.m. will be about the places in news with respect to art and culture specifically. Don't forget to join us live for this session. As you know, in these sessions, we have been discussing the most important news stories from the past 365 days in the form of MCQs. So we'll be discussing the most important questions that have a probability of being asked so that you can also revise it. Make sure you join us at 7:30 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. This is where we are. After that, there are a couple of more classes remaining. Join us for that as well. These are for report and indices and again places in news in general. Now let's come back to see what are the topics that we'll be discussing today. These are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. First, we'll be discussing how the government of India in the past few years has been decreasing its spending on welfare schemes. Some researchers point out that if you look at the welfare schemes run by the government of India, there's a constant decline in the government spending. Second topic that we'll be discussing is about Rajasthan's Right to Health Act. The bill that has now become an act, it was passed. What was the final version of the bill? What are some of the problems? That is what we'll be discussing. Third, we'll be discussing a welcome initiative. Welcome initiative is a joint collaboration between AYUSH and ICCMR, under which we will see that ICCR and AYUSH will come together to make sure that now Ayurveda, yoga, all these kind of alternate medicinal activities are also given the kind of scientific approach and scientific help that is given to other medicines. Then from the prelims point of view, we will be discussing first, central government's efforts to make a new Model Prisons Act, how the prison law is changing in India. Second, we'll be discussing about how India is now put on the watch list of the Aviation leasing watchdog. What exactly is this all about? And in the end, we'll be discussing how RBI, along with some other regulators, is trying to tackle greenwashing. These are the topics that we have for today's discussion. Let's begin without waiting any further. So the first topic that we have is very data heavy. Every now and then, you have some articles in the Hindu newspaper which have a lot of data in them. It will tell you how much expenditure has been done, what reports, what are the different types of percentage. Now, it's just not possible to remember all that data. From this kind of an article, you have to just pick and choose some data that you think is relevant and you can remember. The theme of this article is that the government of India in the past few years has been reducing its spending on welfare schemes. Now, what exactly do you mean by welfare schemes? It mainly means healthcare. It means free food or food subsidy. It can also include education or let's say government's pension. These kind of subsidies are usually a part of what you call as welfare spending. Now, the authors here say if you look at how the government has presented the budget, in all those budgets year after year, the government of India has been cutting down spending as a percentage of GDP. Now, please understand this. There are two ways in which you can look at a government spending. One way is that you can look at absolute numbers. And the other way is to look at as a percentage of GDP. For example, in absolute numbers, the government can say that on a certain scheme, we spent 50,000 crore rupees last year. But this year, we are spending 52,000 crore rupees. Now, government might say this is an increase as compared to last year, we are increasing our budget on this scheme. But if the GDP also has increased as compared to last year, so maybe last year, the government budget for a scheme was 1% of the GDP. Now, that budget may be 0.9% of GDP. So that is not an increase, that's a decline. This is what the authors here are saying. The authors here are giving you examples in terms of these numbers, percentage of GDP, and not in absolute numbers. So please do remember that. Government might claim that in some schemes they are spending more money, but as per the authors, as a percentage of GDP, the government spending on welfare schemes has come down. For example, there are multiple examples that they give. Talk about the Anganwadi program. Anganwadi program has been merged with the Poshan Abhiyan. When 2 or 3 schemes are merged, you expect that the budget is increased, you expect that there will be more people or more money that would be given. However, on the other hand, what is happening here is even after the schemes have merged, the budget has decreased. The budget which used to be 0.13% of GDP has been reduced to 0.07% now. Now, this is very odd because if you look at data from the side of the government itself, National Family Health Survey itself says that India has some of the largest numbers when it comes to patients suffering from anemia, underweight, stunted children. All of these numbers are extremely bad in India, one of the worst in the world. So at such a time, when you think that the government should increase the spending on Anganwadis, because Anganwadis, as you know, is the place where usually children are given nutrition, children are given their first vaccination, they are given nutritional meals, etc., supplementary health, all that is given through Anganwadi and Poshan Abhiyan. So if that spending is decreasing, that means that maybe government is not serious about this particular goal. Then there are other examples. Talk about the midday meal scheme. As you know, midday meal scheme has been a great success. For those of you who don't know, midday meal scheme actually started in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu was the pioneer of the midday meal scheme. The idea was that maybe if we provide free lunch to the children in school, we can increase the number of children coming to school. And that actually happened. If you see the enrollment numbers, before midday meal scheme and after midday meal scheme, there was a huge difference between the two. After the midday meal scheme was introduced, there was a large number of students who enrolled in the schools. It not only helped with their nutrition, it also helped with their education. Now, across the country, we had the midday meal scheme. It serves about 12 crore children. However, even budget for that has been reduced. The midday meal scheme budget, which was 0.08% of the GDP in 2014-15, is now 0.04%, so almost half. Not just this, recently the Tamil Nadu government has started making one very interesting change in midday meal scheme. Tamil Nadu government has even introduced free breakfast also in the midday meal scheme. So earlier it used to be just lunch. In Tamil Nadu now they have breakfast also. But center government has not accepted this idea. In Tamil Nadu, ever since breakfast has also been included in the midday meal scheme, the results have been very, very positive. We have seen even better student enrollment, we have seen even better student health, but center government has not done that. So again, there are questions that are being raised. Then there is another example of PM Matra Vandana Yojana. This is mainly to help those mothers who were working earlier, but because of their pregnancy, now they are losing out on their income. Under the PM Matra Yojana scheme, Matra Vandana Yojana scheme, they also get maternity benefits. There is cash transfer of up to 5,000 rupees to women in the unorganized sector because they don't get paid leaves, etc. for maternity. For this also, the budget has come down. As per the researchers, for this scheme, the government should have at least 14,000 crore rupees, but they have only allocated 3,000 crore. Meaning that if you look at the number of women working in the unorganized sector, if you want to cover all of them, the budget that you require, the government has almost only 1/5 of that budget. So this is again a very, very serious concern. Similarly for Manrega, food subsidy, for all of these, the budget has come down. Budget was announced when it was announced, in fact in February we saw for Manrega specifically there was a lot of debate. Manrega budget is even lesser than what was last year. All these are problems that the researchers are pointing towards. Then we have the National Social Assistance Program, where help is given as a form of pension to those who are elderly, widow or disabled individuals below poverty line. That budget has also come down. So basically all these are examples of budget of the welfare schemes coming down. Now there are different ways in which you can look at it. Number one, there are certain schemes where budget has increased. It's not that the budget has not increased in any scheme. For example, if you look at central health expenditure, the budget has increased. Not just this, UNICEF has pointed out that India has the lowest vaccination rates in South Asia. That also sends a signal that India should increase government spending on health. India's out-of-pocket expenditure still remains very high. Out-of-pocket expenditure means the money that you have to spend on your health, which is not covered by insurance or government. This means that government should have made sure that more money is spent in welfare scheme, but that is not happening. Now, what exactly is the outcome of this, or how can you actually understand this? There are various ways in which you can look at this. First, look at the government side of the story. As you can see here, this is a snippet I've taken from PIB. The government says that we have increased spending on scheme, not decreased. But the difference is, government is talking in terms of absolute numbers. The government is talking in terms of absolute numbers, that this is the absolute number that has increased. But researchers are talking about the percentage of the GDP, number one. That's the big difference. Second difference is, understand, when the government gives a budget to a certain scheme or announces the component of a scheme in the yearly budget, that doesn't mean it cannot increase or decrease. You know that the government can always pass supplementary grants in between the year and they can increase the allocation. For example, last year also Manrega allocation was very low. Then towards the end of the year, because the government wanted more money in Manrega, so they again introduced supplementary grant in the parliament and they got more budget for Manrega. So it's not that whatever budget is announced during the budget speech is final. You all know that it can be increased or decreased. There is one more thing I would like to point out here. A lot of people have this confusion. See, when you say that government spends 3% of GDP on this, or 4% of GDP, or 5% of GDP, please understand, GDP is not really something that you understand as the total expenditure of government. So please don't think that this is the GDP, this is what the government has to spend, this much in defense, this much in health, this much in education. No, that is not what GDP is. Please understand, GDP is not equal to the total expenditure of the government. As you know, this is not GDP. So GDP is not really the best way to ascertain whether the government is spending enough money or not on a certain kind, on a certain area. If you actually have to see how much the government is prioritizing a certain sector or not, you should in fact take the number of the total expenditure of the government, how much is being done on healthcare or how much is being done on education or defense, etc. That is how you will get much better idea of whether the government is prioritizing a sector or not. So make sure that you don't confuse that 2% of GDP means 98% of GDP is being spent somewhere else. So GDP is not the entire expenditure of the government, that's a different number altogether. For example, if you talk about budget, now, budget, or when in the budget, if you look at defense expenditure over 15% of India's total expenditure in a year is for defense, over 15% of it. That doesn't mean over 15% of GDP is being spent on defense, right? There's a difference between the two. 15% of GDP expenditure is not equal to 15% of the entire expenditure. These are two very different things. I also wanted to show you some other very important numbers. These are numbers taken from the budget itself, how the government of India mainly has been spending money prior to pandemic, that is before the pandemic and after pandemic, in the form of subsidies. As you can see, subsidies were very, very high in these 2 years. That is when India was going through the pandemic. So this was an exception. And after that, the subsidies are coming down. One by one, the government is trying to reduce the subsidies. So this subsidy, again, if you compare it with last 2-3 years, it will obviously seem to reduce. Please make sure that you understand this. When you compare subsidies or government expenditure as compared to 2-3 years, that will always go down because the pandemic year was an exception. So if you have to compare it with at least 4-5 years ago. That will give you a much, much better picture. Another graph that shows you how the government actually has been spending money amongst social welfare schemes. For example, if you can see here, 14% of government expenditure goes to, in the social healthcare sector, goes to education, art, culture. 11% goes to medicine. There is rural development at 17%, but the largest is food subsidy and civil supplies. So over the years, the largest component of government social welfare scheme money always goes to food subsidy. Please do remember this fact as well. It can be asked in the prelims. The largest component usually over the years of the government's welfare spending is on the food subsidy. You know, we had the National Food Security Program, we have the Antyodaya Yojana. During the COVID-19 crisis, most people were given free food grains. That is why, if you see, this is usually the largest of it. And see this COVID year. Do you see this? 2020-21. This budget of specifically the food subsidy grew so much. Over half of the government's social welfare budget was just for the food subsidy, 53%. 53% of it was here. Again, that was because during the time of the COVID, the government gave a lot of free food grains. Another example I wanted to share with you, it's not that government is only decreasing spending on all government schemes. Usually what happens when these kind of articles are written, if a researcher has to prove that government is reducing its spending, the researcher will only give you examples from their point of view. But it doesn't really mean that the government expenditure is not increasing anywhere. Government expenditure is increasing. For example, if you look at the Jal Jeevan Mission. In the Jal Jeevan Mission, the government's expenditure has increased considerably, if you see this. So it's not that it is only government decreasing the spending, government also increases the spending depending upon whatever is the priority of the government at that point of time. So this is how it changes time and time again. Please do make sure that you don't think that because an article says government spending is decreasing, it's decreasing everywhere. It decreases in some aspects, and then as per the government's own priorities, they might increase the government spending somewhere else, as you can see over here in the Jal Jeevan Mission. This was our first article of the day. Let me quickly take up a few questions before we move on to the second one. Surya, I'm glad that you saw this live. Ashu Singh, will it help Modi government to make friendly relations? What will help? I'm not sure what are you asking. Make friendly relations with whom? And what exactly will help? Not sure what your question is. Then I have a question. In my opinion, this is a good initiative by government to cut down budget because government has to expand on other things. We should not depend on government schemes. It's a see, you have to understand. We are in such a stage as a developing country, government has to spend on welfare of people. But every single year, the government's focus areas will have to be different. For example, when the COVID-19 crisis hit, the government's focus area was healthcare. So they started spending a lot on healthcare. When a report comes out that says India's nutrition value is low, then they start focusing a lot on food. We are a country where the government has to invest a lot in the welfare schemes. And the fact is, even in the rich countries, governments do spend a lot on welfare. So it's unfair to say that India or developing countries are the only ones that spend on welfare. US spends a lot of money on their healthcare. So it's not that government cannot or should not do this. Government should do this. But again, you have to understand the problem that the government of India has is the amount of money they earn is limited. If you see how many people pay taxes in India, people go to every limit possible just to avoid paying taxes, right? There are very few people who legally pay direct taxes in India. Very few people will actually pay direct taxes. They do every single jugaad, as you call it, to avoid paying taxes. So now, when lower number of people pay taxes, the government has lower money. When the government has lower money or government has lesser money, they have to prioritize some sectors over the other. In an ideal world, government should be able to spend on all the sectors, but we are not living in an ideal world, right? So government has to prioritize it. What to prioritize, what not to prioritize. On one hand, you want the government to introduce the old pension scheme also. On the other hand, you want the government to have the best weapons also. On the other hand, you also want the government to spend on the best of hospitals. We are not living in an ideal world. In an ideal world, all these things should happen, but we are not living in an ideal world. We have to make do with whatever little resources the government has, and that is why you have to see some resources or some sectors are prioritized over the others. You might like it, you might not like it, depending upon which sector you are in right now. If your sector gets more government funding, you will be happy. Otherwise, you will not be happy. As simple as that. Pushpa, because this is the usual way. Usually, percentage of GDP is the way in which you analyze the government spending. This is the usual way. It's not that this is the only way. Then, why is government not increasing allocation on education? Again, you have to understand if, okay, I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you have your birthday. Okay, let's say you have your birthday. Now, in your birthday, you have your cake, you cut your cake. The question is, to how many people can you feed that cake? You can feed your cake to your family members, maybe your friends who come in. Now, if I ask you, why did you not give cake to everyone in your city? You are very bad. Why did you not give cake to every single person living in your city? What would you say? What would you say? What would your answer be? You have to understand, when the resources are limited, you can't distribute that in every sector. One single small cake can't be distributed to everyone in the entire city or in the entire country. So when you say, why is government not spending on this sector, that sector, this sector, that sector, the problem is you have to prioritize some sector over the other. That is where the government has to take a choice. You might like it, you might not like it, not defending the government, but just telling you what the fact is in India. The day that everyone starts paying their taxes properly, we might not have this problem. Okay. Then I'll take one or two more and then I'll go ahead very quickly. Is it a good move from the government to cut expenditure from midday meal schemes? Not really. Midday meal schemes has always been very good. They have always given good results. But again, as I said, cutting down expenditure from any particular scheme in the budget is not final. They can always increase it later on when they think that there is a requirement. Okay, let's go ahead then. The next article that we have here is about Rajasthan's Right to Health Act. We did discuss a lot about it. The Right to Health bill that was introduced in Rajasthan has now converted into an act, means it has been passed by Rajasthan legislature. Now, what exactly is this? What is the issue about it? Let's try and understand this. In simple terms, Rajasthan government had introduced this law under which it was mandatory on all the hospitals that if a patient comes to them for emergency services, they cannot say no. That was a simple idea. That if a patient comes in, they don't have money, doesn't really matter, the hospitals have to say yes, they have to provide emergency care. Now, the problem here was that the doctors and the hospital, the nursing homes were not happy about it. They had all those problems. The problems on those kind of issues were that, number one, there was no definition of the word emergency. Let's take a very simple example. Let's say that there's a dentist and there's a patient who comes into the dentist hospital and says, I have a heart attack, it's an emergency. Now the problem is the dentist can't treat a patient who has a heart attack, even though it's an emergency. But then under the law, you will punish the dentist, because why did you not care for the patient? You are a hospital, you have to care for the patient, it's an emergency. So this is the problem, that you have not defined properly what is an emergency, what is not an emergency. You have not even defined exactly which doctor should treat who. If there is an accident case, for example, and then you come to an eye clinic that you have to please treat me, I am in an emergency situation. So an eye clinic hospital cannot treat an accident patient. That is the entire problem here. So what happened was, when there was so much protest against this bill was given to a committee, and committee made certain changes before passing the bill. For example, there were certain changes made. The term designated healthcare centers was introduced, means which are the centers where you can actually go for this healthcare and which are centers where you cannot go, number one. Secondly, reimbursement clause for unpaid emergency care was added. In the earlier bill, there was no clause that how much money will the government give to a hospital. If a hospital admits a patient who doesn't have money, how much money will the government pay? It was not mentioned in the bill. Now it has been mentioned properly in the bill. The other part that was changed was, earlier the bill said that there would be a representative from Ayurveda, homeopathy and Unani in the regulatory body that will look into the working of this bill. The doctors protested that no, we want more doctors from the medicinal field and not from the Ayush field. This is something again that the government changed. Government changed it and government said, okay, we are introducing medical education representatives in the regulatory body so that the bill or the law can become better. The other part of the problem was earlier the law was that if a patient has a problem, let's say if there's a patient who has a problem and who goes to the hospital and the hospital does not admit him or her. In other words, if the hospital refuses to give you treatment, the earlier law was that you could complain to online portal of the government. This is also something that the hospitals were not in favor of. Now what has happened? Now you don't have to go to the hospital, you don't have to go to an online portal. You can complain in that hospital only. You can complain to the authorities within the hospital. Let me repeat. Earlier, if a hospital denied you the treatment, you could go to a government portal to complain. Now that has been removed. Now what happens? You have to go and complain in the same hospital to the hospital authorities. This is again the problem that exists in the bill. But this was done so that the private hospitals, etc., are in favor of the bill. There was one more very important provision added. That was, government said that those hospitals or nursing home with less than 50 beds, so smaller scale hospital, less than 50 beds, they will not be a part of this law. Less than 50 beds, and those, apart from this, those who have not taken any help from the government, who have not taken any concession on their land or building from the government, they will be outside this law. Please understand, usually what happens when you set up a hospital or you want to set up a school or college, usually you can go to the government, ask for subsidized land because you are doing something good for the society. So governments, usually for setting up hospitals, schools, give you land at a very cheap cost so that you can set this up for the welfare of the society. In this case, the government is saying, now if any hospital was set up without the government help, without the government subsidy on land, then you will not be under this bill. You don't have to worry about this. This is what the law now is. There's also an example that is given of US. The US has a law called Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, EMTALA. Under that act, 98% of the US hospitals are covered for this kind of a treatment. But in case of Rajasthan, because you have excluded those hospitals which have 50 or less than 50 beds, and you have excluded those hospitals which have not taken help from the government, that means majority of the hospitals are now not under the act, because most of the hospitals here in Rajasthan are those which have a capacity of 50 or less than 50. This is why this bill has become controversial now. Again, earlier the controversy was it was being opposed by the medical experts, by the doctors, hospitals. Now the problem is common people are saying that this bill is not helpful anymore because you have made so many exceptions. That is why the problem now exists here. There are the certain important features of the bill that you should know. This has been a lot in the news, a debate for right to health. Should the governments actually provide the right to health or not? Should a person have the right to get admitted to any hospital or not? These are all the important features. Now, over here, I wanted to ask you or wanted to tell you something else as well. There is a concept of out-of-pocket expenditure. We have discussed this earlier as well. Governments across the world, including government in India, have been trying to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure as much as possible. Out-of-pocket expenditure means when you are ill, you go to a hospital, either you pay through your insurance because you have a health insurance, or if it's a government hospital, the government will pay for it. But if you don't have either, you are going to a private hospital, so you have to pay, you don't even have insurance coverage. What will happen is now you will have to pay from your own pocket. This is called out-of-pocket expenditure, where you have to pay yourself. There's no insurance coverage. The government also is not paying through any scheme. In an ideal scenario, in any country, out-of-pocket expenditure should be as low as possible. Why? Because out-of-pocket expenditure does not allow the people to actually get health care. Only when you have out-of-pocket expenditure, then only the rich people would be able to get healthcare coverage and the others would not be able to do that. This is why governments have been trying to reduce out-of-pocket expenditure. Right now, the out-of-pocket expenditure in India has come down, but it is still very high. 48.2%. Means, in other words, close to half of the bill every single time people have to pay from their own pocket. This is where the problem is. We still do not have enough insurance coverage. We still do not have enough people buying health insurance. If you're in the formal sector, the government or the company where you're working most probably will give you insurance coverage, but very few people actually get insurance coverage from their own money. This is a problem which is called the missing middle. There is a missing middle problem. What is missing middle? Missing middle means if you look at the entire population, the poor people, they get insurance from the side of the government, like Ayushman Bharat, etc. So Ayushman Bharat and these kind of schemes, they cover the poor people. Then upper middle class or rich people, they get insurance from themselves, or they are in the formal sector. So their own corporates, their own companies actually give them the insurance. The problem is the middle people. The people here in the middle, they are called the missing middle because they don't even get insurance facilities from the government or their employer, and they don't even take it themselves. And this is where the problem here starts. These are some of the issues which the hospitals or the doctors had pointed out. Many of these have now been resolved. First, as I said, there is no definition. There was no definition of who will treat who. How can, let's say, a dentist treat someone who has a heart attack if it's an emergency? Second, no clear mechanism on how the reimbursement will happen. And thirdly, we still have no proper definition of what is emergency. There can be different definitions of the word emergency. Maybe if I have a lot of pain in my leg, I will say it's an emergency. Maybe for someone else, something else will be an emergency. This is where this problem was raised by the doctors and the healthcare experts. This was the second topic. Let me again take up a few questions. A lot of friendships being formed in the chat, I see. I hope these friendships are lifelong friendships because otherwise you're just wasting your time. Okay, let me take up a few questions. Ashu has a question. Do you agree trade relations between US and China and the uncertainty around exit could have an impact on India's economy in the long term? I don't think so because US and China trade relations have always existed. It's not something that happened today or yesterday. US-China trade relations have always existed. Uncertainty about Brexit, again, it's an old thing. Maybe you are asking a question 4 years later. Maybe if you would have asked this question to me 4 years earlier, maybe the answer would have been different. But I don't think any of these are things that are contemporary right now. Anuja is saying right to health isn't under Article 21. Yes, not implicitly mentioned under Article 21. Okay. Then Ashok is saying doctors. But Ashok, are you asking your question to me or someone else? Because you were talking to someone else in the chat. I thought your question is to someone else. Okay, let me take up a few other questions. Those are actually paying attention. Then Ayush card also works on the same concept. Yes, Ayush card or Ayushman Bharat works on a similar kind of a concept, but it is not for everyone. The Ayushman Bharat Yojana doesn't cover everyone. That is the big problem. Then I have a question. NGO expense is out-of-pocket expense. No, I'm not sure how NGO will pay for people's treatment. Out-of-pocket expenditure is when an individual makes that payment. That is what out-of-pocket expenditure. Then I have a question. How will the government look at hospital authorities if they don't take care of the query? That is the entire job of the government, right? It's like saying, how will the police get to know if someone hurt me when I filed a case? How will the police get to know? Because they'll investigate. That is the entire job of the police or the government, right? So if your question is how will the government get to know, because that is the responsibility of the government, that is how they regulate, that is how they look into cases. So as simple as that. Then I have a question. Can you explain about okay, Dipesh is saying, can you explain about NFHS 5? NFHS is National Family Health Survey. The 5th installment has come out. National Family Health Survey. This is a survey done by the Government of India about health and family welfare. The 5th installment has come out. It has a lot of numbers like malnutrition, nutrition, marriage, a lot of those numbers come out. This is called National Family Health Survey. 5th installment has come out. Then, why is Rajasthan lacking in insurance policy? It's not just Rajasthan. Nowhere in the country do we have enough people who have insurance policies. Insurance policies are not really the top priority for the people, because everyone thinks that nothing will happen to me. I'm fit and fine. I don't need an insurance policy. This is where the problem is. So most people do not really take an insurance policy, unfortunately. Let's go ahead then. The third article that we want to discuss today is about a joint collaboration that has happened between ICMR and AYUSH. ICMR is Indian Council of Medical Research, and then there is AYUSH. AYUSH is Yoga, Ayurveda, Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, Sova Rigpa, and Homeopathy. Now what exactly is this The AYUSH, that is called alternate medicine. AYUSH is called alternate medicine. So India has been considered as the home of alternate medicine. A lot of people treat themselves in India using Ayurveda, homeopathy, naturopathy, etc. A lot of people from outside India also come to India for these kind of initiatives. But the problem is many people still don't believe in AYUSH initiatives. Many people still don't believe that AYUSH works. So what has happened now is the government of India has now ensured that Ministry of AYUSH collaborates with Indian Council of Medical Research so that they can come together and they can actually prove the efficiency of the Ayurveda medicines. This is the entire idea, to prove the efficiency of Ayurveda medicine so that more and more people can trust. This is where this entire collaboration will be helpful. Okay. Mr. Music Lover, good luck to your uncle. Please stop spamming the chat now. We have all read what you're saying. I'll just have to, delete your messages. Okay. Bye-bye. Good, say hello to your uncle. Okay. Apart from that, as I said, the entire idea is that Ayurveda and Ayurveda-related medicines should be proved or should have been proven that they also have the same kind of impact, so that people have more confidence in opting for Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, or these kind of alternate medicinal treatments. Now, this collaboration will result in human trials. So basically, in simple terms, what will happen, let's say some person is suffering from a disease, XYZ, whatever disease is. That person will be given normal medicine, allopathic, and that person will also be given Ayurveda medicine. And then we will see, compare how much was the impact of the medicines on the person and on that particular disease, so that we can have a proper study how effective are the Ayurveda medicines as compared to allopathic medicines. That is the idea that the government has. In the beginning, from the entire AYUSH range, only Ayurveda will be tested. After Ayurveda testing, then other kind of things, that is yoga, Unani, homeopathy, will also be tested later on. But for now, ICMR will only start testing the Ayurveda medicines one by one. There will be proper clinical trials. Clinical trials means proper scientific study will be conducted here so that we can see how much is a person's health improving by taking the Ayurveda medicine. Now, why do we do that? The reason being that if these kind of alternate medicines become better or they help people, number one, more and more people can opt for these, so lesser side effects. Secondly, it can also be India's way of exporting this medicine or medicinal therapy to around the world. Because see, AYUSH is something which has been born in India. It's a part of India's culture, it's a part of India's tradition. So if we can actually prove that all of this works as per science, we can be much more confident in exporting a lot of this to countries outside. This is what the idea is. So AYUSH is now collaborating with ICMR. Now there are a couple of things I wanted to show you. Ministry of AYUSH anyways has been a lot in the news. In the past 3-4 years, the government has been pushing a lot to make sure that more and more people now turn towards AYUSH, that is Ayurveda, Yoga, naturopathy, etc. There is one thing that I wanted to show you, that is year-end review of this ministry. Now please understand this. Every ministry of the government of India at the end of the year releases a report which is called the year-end review. It's a common occurrence. Every ministry does it. Ministry of Education does it. Finance does it. Railway does it. Every ministry will do that. In that report, they highlight what did they achieve in the last 1 year. What were the major achievements. So similarly, Ministry of Ayush also recently released a report where they talked about the achievements in the field of Ayush. I also would advise you to focus a lot on Ayush because the government has been focusing a lot on many initiatives in Ayush. So make sure that you read about the year-end review. These are the important pointers. For example, WHO recently inaugurated Global Center for Traditional Medicine. This is the only kind of its center in the entire world. This was inaugurated in Jamnagar, Gujarat. So it proves that WHO also is interested in testing the efficiency of Ayush medicines. We also have the Global Ayush Investment and Innovation Summit in 2022. It was again held in Gujarat where a lot of investments came in. In the food category in India, FSSAI has introduced a new category that is called Ayush Ahar. Ayush Ahar would be a tag given to those products which are Ayurvedic nutritional supplements. All these are being done to give a push to Ayush. Then 3 Ayush institutes have been set up in the country. All India Institute of Ayurveda in Goa, National Institute of Unani Medicine in Ghaziabad, and National Institute of Homeopathy in Delhi. So all these have come up. Again, it's an initiative from the side of the government of India to give more push to Ayush. This also the part of the year-end review. For example, the government has launched one herb, one standard. The government wants to use as many medicinal herbs as possible for treating people. There was another MOU signed between Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology and Ministry of Ayush so that all the science and all this stuff, knowledge about Ayush, it can be converted into digitized form. FSSAI, as I said, has put another category called Ayurveda Ahar as well. All these are government initiatives which the government has taken specifically to give a push to the Ayush ministry. Again, very relevant for prelims and mains both because of the government's push towards the Ayush ministry. This was our discussion for the mains topics for today. Before we go on to the prelims ones, again, let me quickly take up a few comments and then we'll go ahead. Ashok, yes, as Mukesh has rightly told you, Ministry of Ayush is a separate ministry itself. It doesn't come under any other ministry. It's a separate ministry itself. Shantanu is saying why our government is not allowing basic knowledge of Ayurveda education in our schools. Government doesn't ban any knowledge from your school. So if your school wants to give you that knowledge, government is not banning that. Again, an example of let's not blame the government for everything. If your parents tomorrow, for example, don't tell you what is Ayurveda, can you blame the government? Why are they not telling this to you? No. Similarly, what schools teach, what curriculum the schools have, government doesn't control it. So if the schools really want to give you that knowledge, they can. It's not they cannot. Plus in schools you anyways have so much to study. What else will you study? Then I have a question. Specific treatment of Ayush? I'm not sure what your question is. Ayush is a form of treatment only. So those who believe in Ayush or practitioners of Ayush say that you don't have to take allopathic medicines for any disease that you have. Ayush also have a cure without any side effect. Sunny saying Ayush Ministry initiative only homeopathy. No. Ayush has a full form. Only the H in Ayush stands for homeopathy. There is A for Ayurveda, then Yoga, Unani, Siddha, Naturopathy. All of these are part of Ayush. Kavi saying, will the Ayurvedic medicines without prescription also come under OTC? Yes. Most Ayurvedic medicines do come under OTC only. OTC is over the counter, those who don't know. A.K. Sharma has a question, difference between Ayush and Ayurveda. Guys, please understand, Ayush has a full form. A is for Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is a part of Ayush. Okay? Ayurveda is a part of Ayush. I give you the full form. I'll just take you back here. See, this is the full form. See. A for Ayurveda, Y for Yoga, then we have Naturopathy, Unani, Siddh, Sova Rigpa, and homeopathy. So this is the full form of Ayush. So Ayurveda is a part of Ayush only. Okay. Yes, naturopathy is also part of Ayush only. See, I am not a doctor. So those asking me which one is better, I don't know. You should ask a doctor. I don't know Ayush is better or medicine is better. Whatever works for you, just take that. So I am no one to say that one is better over the other. I am not a doctor. Please don't take my advice on medicine or on investment purposes. So do your own research. Whatever suits you, whatever floats your boat, just take that. Perfect. Let's go ahead then. I'll just tell you one thing. I'll just tell you one thing before going ahead. There is those people who support Ayush, for example, they have this argument that Ayush or Ayurvedic medicine, let's say, they don't have a side effect. It's not true. See, everything, every single thing on this planet, if you take it more than what you're supposed to, will have a side effect. Every single thing can have a side effect if you don't take it in the right quantity or in the right manner. There is nothing that does not have a side effect. If you have a favorite dish and you eat 10 plates of that dish, it will have a side effect, right? You will start feeling bad, you will vomit, or there will something that will happen to you. So everything has a side effect. It's not that Ayush or Ayurveda doesn't have a side effect. Everything which is not taken in perfect quantity, everything which is not taken properly will have a side effect, as simple as that. Okay, let's start with the prelims point of view. The first one is the center government is preparing a new Model Prison Act. Now, what I want to tell here is, all of you know prison is a state subject, right? Prison is a state subject. So those who don't know, please remember, prison is a state subject under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, my question to you is, you have to tell me, if prison is a state subject, then how is it that the center government is making the Model Prisons Act? If prison is a state subject and states have to make the law on that, how is it that the center government is making a Model Prisons Act, that how prisons will be run? What do you think? Why is it, or how is it the center government has the power? Any idea? Okay, don't go Google. Let me tell you. So basically what happens is, why is it that the center government makes a law on a state list subject? Please understand this. Number one, as you know, the center has to make a law for some union territories. First, please remember, the center government does have the power to make laws for union territories for the state subjects, right? So that is one argument, that union territories they have to. Second is, for the states, it is just a model act. Model act means it's a suggestion given to the states. It's a suggestion given to the state that you should also make a law similar to this. So this is the purpose of the center government making a law on a state list subject. First, as I said, is for union territories, because for union territories, the government of India, parliament is responsible. And second, for the state government, it's a model act. It's like, remember when we show you model answers. So what is the model answer? Model answer is, you can make your answers like this. It's not that you have to just copy that. Similarly, it's to advise the states that you can go ahead and make this kind of a law. Anyway, so what has happened is, we have a very, very old law in India for the prisons. Law has been coming in, law has been working from the time of the British. We now want to change that. We want to remove the British era law, and we have a Model Prisons Act of 2023. Under this, what will happen? The main changes are, for example, criminals, rather than being punished, the idea would be to ensure that they become better people, to ensure that when they come out in the society, they are able to assimilate in the society. Also, criminals who are hardened criminals, etc., there will be increased security. There will be high security jails. Prisoners will also be given proper guidelines for how to apply for parole, furlough. There will be incentives for good conduct. And not just this, the biggest problem that right now we have in our jails is, number one, the number of jails specifically for women are very, very low. So a lot of times in women jails, people are overcrowded because we just don't have enough women jails. Not to say that women should commit more crimes, but yes, we don't have enough women jails, and we certainly don't have enough jails for transgenders. So there should be specific jails for women, transgenders. There should be physical, mental well-being of prisoners should be taking place. All of this is a part of the government of India's initiative to have a better model act for the prisons. That is how it works. Those who are asking what is furlough, so basically parole and furlough are very similar to each other. Both of these mean that prisoners will be allowed to go out for some time. The difference is parole is usually given for a reason. Reason being, for example, let's say someone in your family died, so you have to go there. Or let's say you are extremely ill and you have to go out for a doctor, etc. That is what parole is. So parole is usually given for a reason. Then furlough is not really for a reason. Furlough is usually, for example, someone is serving a very long sentence. So someone, let's say, is in the jail for 20 years. So between these 20 years, for some days they are allowed to go out so that they are in touch with the society. For example, if they just go out after 20 years, all of a sudden everything would have changed. Just imagine, and I still actually kind of think about it. Let's assume someone who was in the jail before demonetization and who came out and after demonetization had happened. Just imagine the mindset of that person. When he went inside the jail, he had some other kind of currency, and when he comes out, he sees all his currency is gone. All that is wasted. Or let's say someone who went inside when there were no mobile phones or no internet, and the person comes out, there's all of a sudden there's a mobile phone, there's an internet, and you don't even know what that is. So all these kind of things mean that when a person is inside the jail for a very long time, you would have to allow that person to go out for some days so they're in touch with the society. So that when they go out, at last, they are able to become a part of society. For that, usually furlough is given. But both of these are not right of the citizens. Means both of these cannot be demanded by the prisoner. They depend upon the conduct of the prisoner. They are dependent upon how the prisoner has behaved, etc. So that is how it usually works. This is an infographic the government of India shared yesterday. It talks about what are the benefits of the Model Prisons Act. It talks about skill development training to be given to prisoners so that when they come out, they can at least have a job. It talks about legal aid to the prisoners, parole, furlough, etc. will be mentioned. There will be proper rules for parole and furlough. Incentives will be given for good conduct. Incentive as in you may be released slightly earlier if you had a good conduct. Then society will be protected from bad criminals, how to take care of them. All these are important provisions that the government of India has introduced. There will also be video conferencing facility for courts. You would have seen, unfortunately, many times, many criminals, when they come to the court, they're attacked or there is some violence, some shooting, etc. So there can also be video conferencing. So the prisoners don't have to go to court. They can take part in the judicial proceedings through video conferencing. Punishment for the jail staff if they allow prohibited items. You might have seen what happened in Tihar just a few days back. There was a gangster in Tihar who was killed inside the jail when the police was just watching them and they could not really do anything about that. Did you read about that? Just a few days back, it was all in the news that a gangster within the jail was killed by the other prisoners with the knives and all these other kind of weapons. So all those jail staff who are responsible for ensuring that these weapons come in the jail, they will also be punished. These are the provisions. Okay, I'll give you a homework for today once again. Now listen carefully to this homework, okay? The homework is, do you know the responsibility of protection within the Tihar jail? Now listen to me very carefully. The responsibility of protecting the prisoners within the Tihar jail is given to the Tamil Nadu State Police. Why is that? Search about it. It's a very interesting reason. Do tell me in the comment section later on after the video ends. The question is simple. Tihar jail's responsibility of protecting the prisoners inside is with the Tamil Nadu police. Now they don't have any connection to the Delhi police, but because Tihar comes under Delhi police or Delhi state. So how is it that Tamil Nadu state was given the responsibility? Think about it. Do tell me in the comment section and then we'll discuss that. Maybe we'll discuss that in the next CNA, just in case you do not really know about this. Okay, let's come back. The next article that we have here is India has now been put on the watch list by Aviation leasing watchdog. Now please try and understand this, what exactly happened here and what is the case all about. Understand this. See, You all know about what happened with Go First. Go First has filed for bankruptcy, right? Now, filing for bankruptcy means that I don't have enough money. I cannot pay back whatever loans are on me. I don't have enough money, right? Now, this is bankruptcy. Now, what has happened is when an airline applies for bankruptcy, the problem starts because most of the airlines do not have their own planes. Most airlines have not owned their planes. They take the airplanes on lease or on rent, as you want to call them. They take the airplanes on lease or on rent from the airline company. So for example, Go First or would have taken all these airplanes from Airbus or from Boeing. Okay. Now the issue here is when Go First says that we don't have enough money, we can't pay the rent to Airbus or Boeing, what will they do? What will they do? They will take back their planes, right? If I have given my car on rent to someone and that person says I don't have money to now rent or to pay rent for your car, what will I say? I'll say, okay, give the car back to me, right? That is the logical thing. However, now what has happened here is the NCLT, India's National Company Law Tribunal, has decided that Go First planes cannot be repossessed by the lessor. Lessors means those companies that have given them the plane, Airbus and Boeing. NCLT has said, given an order in India, that we will not allow the airplanes of Go First to go back to those companies from where they had taken the rent. This is a problem that those companies are facing. The NCLT is saying we cannot allow Go First planes to go back. Why? Because now Go First will not be able to earn any money anyway. They can only earn money when they have those planes and they can run the planes, right? If they don't run the plane, they anyways will never get any money. So NCLT has not allowed these companies to take the planes back. This is what the problem is. Now the issue here is there is an international organization called Aviation Working Group. Aviation Working Group looks after the interest of these companies. These are the two big airplane manufacturing companies in the world. The two biggest airplane manufacturing countries in the world that make all these airplanes for Indigo, Air India, etc. These are Airbus and Boeing. They have captured most of the international market. So this Aviation Working Group looks after the interest of these companies. They are not happy because they think the Indian government has not really done the right thing. So they have put India on the watch list now. They have said that we are keeping an eye on India. You are now just increasing the risk for these companies. From tomorrow onwards, how will they give aircraft to the other company on rent? This is the problem. India has now been put on this watch list because they think India has not given the right decision. They are not looking in the interest of Airbus and Boeing. Now over here, what you have to understand is there is an international convention which you must know about. It is mentioned in this article. There is something called the Cape Town Convention. Cape Town Convention again is a convention to look into the interest of these airplane manufacturing companies and the airlines. This is what the Cape Town Convention is. Cape Town Convention was signed in 2001. India is a party to it. Please remember. India is a party to this convention. It has been signed by ICAO and UNIDROIT. Please search about this. This again is your homework. Which are these two organizations? I'll just give you a hint. ICAO works under the UN. So these two organizations came together to sign a convention. The aim is to resolve problems of different companies when it comes to possession of aircrafts, aircraft engines, helicopters, etc. This is what they do. They have tried to make sure that companies buy more and more advanced aircrafts which pollute lesser. They also promote loans, etc. to buy more fuel efficient aircrafts. The other part is they also encourage that 10% discount should be given to those organizations that are working with us. So those organizations that adhere to this convention, when they go and buy a plane from Airbus or Boeing, they will be given a 10% discount. This is what happens in the Cape Town Convention. Again, India is a party to it. India is a part of it. But as per this convention or as per this international group, India is not adhering to this. They are not looking after the interest of Boeing and Airbus. The problem is NCLT will look after interest of the Indian company, right? As I said, if NCLT allows that, okay, take back the airplanes of Go First, and how will Go First earn any money? The only chance that they have to revive is that they can earn some money. This is where the problem starts. The last article for today is that the RBI is joining with 12 international regulators to take on greenwashing risk. Now, what exactly is greenwashing? We discussed this some time back, if you remember. Greenwashing means when any government or any company makes false promises or makes false claims that we are doing this for the environment, that for the environment. That is called greenwashing. This is the idea of greenwashing. So for example, if I say to everyone, oh, I am a very environment friendly person, I drive an electric car only, my entire house is running on solar energy only, I always take the public transport. If I make these kind of claims, but if they are not true, that is called greenwashing. It's kind of when you say eye washing. So this is what greenwashing is. Many companies and many governments also are doing it these days. For example, usually whenever you go to UN conferences, whenever you have the UNFCCC conference, like Paris Climate Deal, etc., many governments make very big claims that we are doing this and that. India is now trying to achieve net zero by 2070. China is achieving net zero by 2060. So let's assume we don't achieve this, but we still claim that no, we are a net zero country. This will be called greenwashing. RBI and 12 other international regulators are now teaming up to see if this is happening on a large scale or not, so that they can call out those companies. That is called greenwashing. This is the definition of greenwashing. Please do remember this. It's pretty important for all of you. This is when a company or nation projects its efforts or products as climate friendly without verifiable or any support claims. A very famous argument or very famous example is the Volkswagen scandal. I hope all of you know about this. If not, please read about this. It's pretty interesting. The Volkswagen scandal happened when Volkswagen in a large scale claimed to the US government that their car doesn't have any extra emissions, that their car is emitting pollution within the government limits. But that was not true. They were fined very, very high amount of money. That was called the famous Volkswagen scandal. So Volkswagen scandal again is a major example of how greenwashing works. And it's not just private companies, the governments across the world also do that. The problem is it is against a fight against climate change. It will push back the countries that are trying to achieve the net zero goal. It will mainly help the island nations which are at risk of increasing water level. All these are issues of greenwashing that the countries around the world are now fighting against. This brings us to the end of today's discussion. These are a couple of practice questions. I hope you try and write answer to these. As I reminded you earlier, if you are still not a part of our Telegram channel, please use the link given in the description of the video to become a part of our Telegram channel to get all the latest updates about our initiatives here. Also, apart from that, you can get a link of the answer writing portal as well from our description. Click on that link, submit your answers there. You can check each other's answers, give each other feedback. Don't forget to search about the homework that I gave you. Do tell me in the comment section, why is it that the Tamil Nadu police is responsible for Tihar jail security? Thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye. Have a good day. Jai Hind.